Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega and Jamie Soden. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the first cause argument for God's existence and how it is an argument for determinism. Because I've heard this many times, it's listed as one of the oldest arguments for God's existence that everything has to be caused. There has to be a cause for something to happen. And so people have a tendency to say that God is the intelligence that set up all the dominoes and set off the chain of dominoes, which is interesting because I think we can each share our opinions on this thing, but in essentially their argument is an argument for determinism, that things have to be caused. And so we could talk about how effective is this as an argument for both God's existence and for determinism in and of itself. Because I believe that anyone who makes this first cause argument must necessarily refute free will, must reject free will based on their very premise. So, what do you guys think so far?
All right, I think two things. One, yes, when we apply causality like to God's existence, that God must have caused everything. That is a kind of like an example of causality. Um, and so, like if God created the world, God created or caused the world way before anyone was born. So that refutes free will. But there is a kind of an element here that transcends reason, because then the question is like, well, what caused God, or did God exist eternally? And that seems to be the prevalent belief. But I think our logic, our minds, in a certain sense, we can accept that everything, that God always existed. But in a certain sense, like, then God is an uncaused cause, or God is the only uncaused cause in reality. So it's not completely, I think, satisfactory, but I think that's the best we get to it. I think that's a better answer than saying that there was like that God just like came into being at a certain point, and before that, God wasn't. But either prospect would refute free will, though.
Yeah, and see, my larger point is explaining how it conflicts with free will. Because one thing we have to admit is that the only way to get out of this is to throw in acausal events, throw in things happening for no reason, which of course blows apart free will just as much. But part of the problem with acausality, if things can be caused uncaused, uncaused cause, where a god pops into existence after not existing before, well, then there would be no rule to say that only one such god can pop into existence. An infinite number of gods might randomly pop into existence at any time. So I would say that not only does it mess up free will, whether you have determinism or indeterminism, but it also ruins monotheism if you try to throw in acausal events. So I think the only thing that we're stuck with is either an eternal God that created the universe, or an eternal universe, which is what I stand for. But of course, I know, George, for you, God is the universe in a way.
Right. I would kind of like, because, for example, like the universe has laws of nature, cause and effect being a law of nature, just things that govern the universe, things that make the universe behave as it does. And so, like, when you think of it, you can like describe that naturalistically as the universe, as the laws of nature, or, theologically, you could describe that as God. God is what kind of like sets the rules that the universe has to, behave by. So it's kind of like it is one can you know God and the universe in that sense seem to be synonymous.
Well, here's an interesting thought, George. I believe it's called the first law of thermodynamics that matter is neither created nor destroyed. And I think we need to consider the question of is that true? Because if it is true that matter is neither created nor destroyed but just constantly changes form, I think that implies to an eternal universe. You know?
Yeah, and there's something interesting about that law and actually about every other physical law that we understand. And that's that, basically that these laws somehow, according to our best understanding, because otherwise we're just guessing, they came into existence at the Big Bang. In other words, like before the Big Bang, we couldn't say that you know in other words, it logically seems to us that the matter, that the energy that was there at the Big Bang, it would seem that it had to have existed before, but we don't have any evidence of that, so we just posit that just logically, kind of like based on that law, based on the law that you can't create or destroy anything, but most technically, that law and all the laws of nature they tend to apply post Big Bang, but again with some of them at least logic would dictate that they also existed before that event.
Yeah, and it's interesting because see, if like with the whole thermodynamics thing, if matter is neither created nor destroyed, then whatever we have now, if there was a Big Bang, all that energy and matter still had to be there.
Yeah,
But
Jamie, what's your take on this?
my take is, you know, the whole parallel universe or multiverse theory that string theory brings up. Well, I think if energy and matter can't be created nor destroyed, but changes from one form to another, like the first law of thermodynamics implies, then we have to. You can almost assume that there had to be universes before this one, can't you, George?
Yeah, and see, like, Jamie, that's a really good point because, like, there's two ways of talking about multiple universes. One way is kind of like that they come one after each other. Like there was a universe before this, and then maybe like, you know, I mean, actually, it's interesting because our current thinking, our current knowledge seems to tell us that the universe is expanding at a faster and faster rate, which would mean that it wouldn't collapse on itself, because like we used to think that it would. Who knows, maybe it does, but that would be like a universe following a universe following a universe. But there's another conception of multiple universes that I'm not sure I really can go with, because it doesn't make sense in a certain way. I mean, basically, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics that says, like, anytime there is, like, for example, particle A can move to position 1 or position 2, right? It has that option based on, like, it's a possibility. And actually, it could move into position 3, 4, 5, and an infinite number of other positions, apparently. So, like, the multiple universes theory, the many worlds interpretation rather, says that, well, all those things happen. And I'm sorry, I just can't buy that. That's kind of like just saying, well, everything's possible, anything's possible, so everything's possible. But it's just like, I don't think we have any evidence of that. It's just like a theory. But again, what you were referring to in terms of like one universe following the next, following the next, that makes sense. Yeah, that could conceivably be.
And the end of the universe that's supposed to happen. I mean, there's multiple scenarios, there's multiple theories based on how the universe will end, but the most likely ones seem to be either Big Rip, Big Freeze, or vacuum decay. I think it's called, George. Have you heard of it?
Um, I'm not sure I'm familiar with vacuum decay. Can you describe that a bit, or?
It's something to do with the energy states of the universe changing. Like you got the false vacuum, and then you got the true vacuum. What we're in at the moment, according to the Wikipedia and other sources, is the universe is supposed to have a quantum state called the false vacuum, and a true vacuum is a different kind of energy state. If that happened, if a true vacuum happened, then the whole space-time continuum would change basically, and this universe will be like effectively erased and replaced with another.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I think the important point about any of these prospects is they're all causal, right? They all rely on cause and effect. Something is causing, like the vacuum to change form, or the universe to collapse or freeze or whatever. And so, like,
Would
so,
that be, would that be
huh?
common sense? Yeah, I mean it would have to be causal. I mean, if it you can't have Saint the Sun caused, can you? So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though I don't understand that how the universe would end, because one person told me the universe is going to burn up, somebody else has told me it's going to freeze, and I don't know the science behind that. But for me, it's just as hard to imagine an end to the universe as it is the beginning of the universe. I mean, I could see a disaster, like maybe someone could say a disaster would happen that would wipe out all the conscious life, but the matter would still all be there somewhere.
Right. So, it's Chandler, I think what you're making a distinction between the observable universe that started 13.8 billion years ago at the Big Bang, and the theoretically infinite universe that theoretically or logically existed before the Big Bang and will exist after the end of this, observable universe, if it ends. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point, George, because when I talk about the universe, I am not just about the observable universe. I'm like about the stuff that's somewhere whether we can observe it or not.
you mean all of existence?
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically all of existence, one existence, uni meaning one. Which
yeah.
See, yeah, because I mean, like, again, like we run into a logical problem with an infinite regress into the past, but we also run into a major one when we posit that, well, this Big Bang, it started the size of a particle, and it expanded to like this, size now that's so, gargantuan. Then the question becomes, of course, well, what did it expand into, So again, there's some aspects of this Big Bang theory and of our understanding our universe, they transcend logic. That's a simple way it just our logical reasoning just cannot, come up with a conception of how it works.
Well, I
But
tend to think of space itself being infinite. And so I tend to think that no matter how far someone would go in any direction, they just keep going. But of course, they die eventually.
well,
Well,
yeah, from starvation or old age. Yeah.
but that kind of like applies to the infinite universe. But then, like, for example, like when you apply that reasoning to the known universe, the observable universe, it's been expanding, since 13.8 billion years ago, right? So it's expanding, and then you got to posit, wait a minute, so there's got to be an edge of that expansion, right? And so then you've got like an edge between the observable universe and the infinite universe. And so, and how do we understand that? Because you're right. I think logically we kind of like would have to assume that our observable universe, if there's nothing to stop it, will continue expanding indefinitely, eternally into this void.
It's almost like we're just tiny pieces of DNA inside of a cell, which is inside of something else, which is inside of something else, and it just goes bigger and bigger.
I mean, who knows? I mean, this universe might be in a endless sea of other universes. But if there are other universes, then it's no longer called a universe. It's called a multiverse.
Right, and even that, like, so like if there were, let's say, an infinite number of multiverses, then they would be subsumed under one, reality. Because a universe basically means one, right? So like,
Yeah.
so we would apply these island universes, and altogether they would comprise one universe. But in the multiverse, you're right, because like, we have this Big Bang and expansion. For all we know, there could be Big Bangs, at at distances so astronomically far from us that somehow they're not interacting with our expansion.
You,
Exactly.
I think the whole multiverse versus one universe is really semantics, and here's why. Let's take, for example, a chessboard. A chessboard is a great example because the whole thing is a square, whether it's made out of plastic or wood or whatever. The whole thing can be a square, but there's 8 little squares inside that square, and it's all part of one reality of the chessboard. But you have inside each square, you have people talking about their observable square and say, well, this square began this way or whatever, and where other people are talking about the whole square, the one square of existence.
Yeah, I
That's a
mean,
good analogy.
the whole concept of infinite universes, it it's very hard to wrap your head around. I mean, you ever seen what happens when you face one mirror in front of another mirror? It looks like there's infinite mirrors, doesn't it? In the mirror.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and that concept just it's it just gets weird. Yeah, it gets weirder
Right.
and weirder as you look into it.
But the important point for our discussion is like whatever kind of universe or multi-universes or whatever we can conceive of, there's absolutely no mechanism, no model, no theoretical understanding that allows for free will. And that's simply breaking it down to kind of like, well, things are either caused or uncaused, and either prospect prohibits free will. So, if, in other words, like there's certain things that we can know, there's certain things we have to guess at, but this question of whether we have a free will or not, it's not an unknowable. It's not something we have to guess at. The notion of free will is absolutely impossible, regardless of how we see the universe.
Yeah, because repeatable experimentation shows, without a doubt, that things on a chemical level are cause and effect. There is no uncaused when it comes to chemical reactions.
Yeah. See, here's the deal, guys, is it's true that what we are guessing about exactly what happened in the past. I call myself sort of past agnostic in the sense that I don't know what happened in the past with any type of real certainty, but I know it wasn't up to me.
Exactly. That's the thing. Um, but it is, see, one interesting aspect of this whole free will discussion is that it brings us to these other major questions about the nature of reality. Is reality causal? Is it acausal? You know, are we in one universe that's eternal, or are there multiple universes that follow each other? There's a lot of questions. Is the universe conscious, or is the universe just like an inert kind of a thing? And it's like, and these questions, they derive directly from this, exploring this matter of free will. That's why, in a certain sense, the concept of free will can be used like in a curriculum to then introduce so many things, introducing the unconscious, introducing neurobiology, introducing basic logic. So that's why. And the other thing is like we have like certain of our sciences like climate change, evolution. That's just so beyond the average person's ability to figure it out on their own without extensive knowledge, right? And even with climate change, without extensive kind of like faith in the science and scientists that publish results. But with the free will thing and all that we've been talking about, it's a great way to exercise one's logic, to develop one's critical analysis skills in a way that doesn't require all this extra knowledge that these other issues require.
Yeah. See, George, I agree that this free will topic, it's a good starting topic. It's like because once you have the free will question, that introduces you to causality and acausality, which fit into models of the universe and fit into people's belief in God. And so I think there is a natural progression. Like the free will is the first domino of philosophy or science, just basic logic. And then from that, you can discuss other topics. And what I think is interesting, George, is that everyone that I've ever known, it seems they believe in something eternal in some way, because you do have, like, for example, on one hand, you have a lot of monotheists who believe in an eternal God. God is eternal. That's one of the attributes. But then they mock somebody else who just says the universe is eternal. But what I want to know is, why would one person be able to believe in something eternal, but then act like it's messed up for somebody else to believe in something eternal?
That makes sense, yeah. And another thing that this whole free will issue does is that it highlights a deficit in many of our thinking. In other words, some of us get this, some of us understand causality. Causality, cause and effect, is not a difficult, complicated concept. It's pretty straightforward. It's extremely straightforward. It's like 1 plus 1 equaling 2. So we've got a lot of academics, a lot of PhDs who I think they believe they understand causality, but they really don't, especially the ones who kind of like refute free will altogether, like libertarian free will. So, so that provides us with two kinds of challenges. One, to try to understand how these people that are like, they're educated, that somehow they've got good memories, they can learn and they can retain what they've learned and retrieve it, but somehow their critical analysis is very weak. How that could be? How could people be like that? And then the other question, I guess, is like, well, how what do we need to do to be able to like teach this? You know why haven't people understood this, and what do people need to hear in order to be able to understand it?
Well, George, I think of it as a magnificent story. I think of causality. People fear causality because I think they shouldn't fear it because it's really not something to fear. Because they believe that it will take away their sense of control of their life. But first of all, I would say their fears are misplaced because the feeling of control that gives us satisfaction is simply when we are doing what we want, which is obviously not the same thing as free will. Second of all, there is great beauty to be found in determinism because that's what history is. Whenever someone's studying history about events that happen and what caused this or that to happen, well, they're studying about the causes. Well, this person did this and it led to this and this happened and that caused this culture to change or caused this language to evolve from that language. And take, for example, my mom. She likes seeing how music has evolved over time, how different styles of music and different cultures have changed, and what musicians influenced others. And so there's beauty in that. And no matter what topic you're into, studying the causes of things and seeing how it all makes a story is a great thing that we can get enjoyment from.
Absolutely. There's another component that's like when we ask ourselves why some people don't understand this. I happen to be Jewish, by birth, and I was Orthodox Jewish for a while. And yesterday I was actually in a park waiting for a bus, and these two kids, they're like, I don't know, late teens, early 20s. They're Orthodox Jewish. They're basically proselytizing for Judaism. And so, like, I was talking to them, and we got around to the subject. For example, I was making the point, like, because I was making the point that religion has to evolve. And I said to them, like, we used to believe that the sun revolves around us. And now we understand that we revolve around the sun. And this guy that I was talking to was saying, no, actually, the sun does revolve around us because it says it in this book, in this teaching that goes back several thousand years ago. And so his point was like that we shouldn't understand what we understand because it makes sense. We should understand what we understand because it was written somewhere, and we have to believe that what was written somewhere several thousand years ago is true. And let me tell you, that is such a dangerous concept, because, like, for example, in politics, for example, you have a lot of Jews who kind of like believe that, like, because in the Torah it says that, like, that Israel is their homeland forever, they will deny, for example, the Palestinians their rights based on this belief. And in turn, you have a lot of Arabs or a lot of Muslims, or at least some militant ones, that say, well, like, that Judaism and Christianity are kind of like satanic or whatever. So in other words, like, these beliefs, a belief-based ideology that some people like, that causes people to not understand this cause and effect, is extremely dangerous, to the peace in the world and all. So, I think we have really strong reason to pull people from belief, from a belief-based kind of like perspective on reality, to a perspective that, no, it's based on science, it's based on what makes sense, what's reasonable.
Yeah, George, what you just summed up is you summed up the problem that I have with organized religions like that. The ones that have a book that must be believed, no matter what all experience at whatever evidence shows, they have to believe that book over anything else. And what's dangerous about that is that because it only takes one thing to be wrong in there that they believe that causes harm. And so
Yeah,
I agree that we all need to be thinking about things and believe things that actually make sense.
Like Christians commonly believe in eye for an eye, don't they?
Well, yeah,
yeah, well,
it's part
yeah.
of their religion, really.
Actually, that's more Old Testament than New Testament, but yes. And Chandler, you're talking about the only one thing that they have to get wrong, and that one thing is that, like, that this book says the truth. Once they accept that, absurd statement, then that sets the stage for infinite absurdities.
Well, yeah, cause like here's a fine example. If they believe some of the stuff in there, there are, for example, like stories in the Bible, like you know how Solomon had that affair with Bathsheba. And while her husband Uriah was out at war, and so then they had a child together. But then the punishment was that God killed the child, basically.
Oh yeah, and in the Bible, there's like, if the parents sin, or if a couple sins, then the sins of the parents are going to be visited on the children and grandchildren and great grandchildren for generations. That doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem right.
Right, it's certainly not, but it leads us to these bizarre beliefs where when something bad happens, we're not looking at the true causality behind it, but rather we think it's a punishment from some god who's an overlord, or it's some kind of magic karma that is causing us to be punished for something we did in a past life even. Rather than looking at, well, this bad thing happened to us, or this good thing might have happened to us, what caused this to happen? And once we know what caused something to happen, we can cause it to happen more or less. And that's the beauty of understanding the true causality of things, rather than assuming that something bad happened to you because you deserved it. Because I'll tell you, that's the big lie, is that the whole just world fallacy, thinking that people get what they deserve.
Absolutely. I think, the world is changing. The millennial generation, for example, is much more amenable to, like, socialism, to these socialist ideals of, like, well, actually, the collective is more important than the rights of an individual. It's more important for everyone to be taken care of and have enough, to eat and housing and all that. It's more, the group has more of a right to that an individual has, of, like, of being a billionaire, or just like earning as much as they can. So, like, basically, young people in the world are adopting a much wiser, much more sustainable ideology. So I think it's just a matter of time, whether it's 5, 10 years, 20 years. This whole belief, the belief based system, that religions are founded on, I think is going to just evaporate, and with it, this belief that we have free will. Like, right now, again, we're kind of like, we're launching a revolution, we're leading a revolution in thought, It's not going to happen overnight, but it's getting more and more magazines. The first magazine, philosophy magazine, this month, last month, published its first challenge of free will as a cover story. It's been challenged 3 times by major science magazines. So yeah, we are kind of like at the cutting edge of this major revolution. That one thing that just getting back to that other theme is once people look at this topic, it's going to tell us a lot about other people. For example, if we have a leader in the world, both either in academia or in politics, and they're telling us that yes, we have a free will, we can glean from that this person is not very intelligent. This person may be using belief for his criteria, but he's not using reason, and he's being illogical, to a certain extent delusional. So this is a great issue to kind of like, help us kind of like choose our leaders, to kind of like to evaluate a person and determine whether that person is only attempting to sound intelligent, or whether that person got into a position of authority, like being like the president of a college or something, because they actually know things and know how to think, or because they're actually maybe like a charismatic. They know people and they just like, they're not in their positions of authority really because they are quote unquote authorities on whatever it is.
A lot of reason why the politicians are where they are is because they know how to manipulate people, isn't it? So
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think what's interesting is that the reason things persist is because, the whole idea, it like in a sense might makes right, because whoever has the might gets to tell people what's right, and those people believe them because they have the might. That's the problem.
yeah,
yeah, well, I
there's this
mean, and
guy.
that's
Go
go
on.
ahead, James. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, there's this guy that Trick Slatter is debating about free will on Twitter. Um, this free will believer, I'm not gonna say his name, but he claims that he's a determinist, yet he believes in free will. He's kind of a compatibilist in a way. But Trick Slattery tried to explain to him, look, if things can only turn out one way, then how does that leave room for free will? Because our brains obey the same laws of physics as everything else, doesn't it? So same cause, same effect.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in any case, I definitely think people, as they investigate this free will issue, it will help them think more logically in all other areas of their life. And I do think, George, that you're right. There is a change that's happening, and it's only a matter of time before everyone gets this. And so all we're really doing is trying to help prepare people for a new world where people are more compassionate because they no longer really believe that people deserve to suffer.
Yeah, we're getting people to think. A lot of times, it's like the emperor without any clothes. Sometimes people in authority say things and they're accepted because like people don't really think about them. But once they think about them, it's just a matter of time before they get the answer right. And so that's we're playing a major role in this. I mean, there's nobody on the planet that's doing anywhere near what we're doing to lead this revolution in human consciousness. And it is a matter of time, whether it's like, again, 5 years, 10 years, who knows? But that the world is going to change in the direction we're leading it, that's pretty inevitable. I don't think that there's a way that this free will belief can be sustained, even another 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, how long can you keep a lie out before the truth finally gets exposed? I mean, we're in the age of reason where people accept evolution as a fact, because it is a fact. And Richard Dawkins wrote several books on evolution, and you might have read some of them, George Ortega. Um, I believe one of his books is called The Selfish Gene, isn't it, Chandler Klebs?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was basically explaining, like, I think it's something to do with people's morals and ethics and everything else. Like, they're based on culture and upbringing. Um, Everything you do is based on natural selection, and he said that in like a number of his lectures, didn't he? So
Yeah. See, what I like, what here's what I like about evolution is it's about causality. Well, why is this way? How did we get this moral system? How did we get these certain belief systems? So I'm heavily interested in how things have evolved, how things have changed over time, and what we're seeing is a social evolution, a change of ideas, a change in what people believe and how they act, which is that's the most important type right there because it will lead to less pain, more pleasure, more people being happy. That's the idea anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, as I explained in my last book, I mean, this may have major implications for dealing. I mean, climate change is going to be our challenge for the next 100 years at least, you know. I mean, we have to just get a lot of things right. We have to like change the way we do things. And so like, as I explained in my book, if people believe in free will, and that belief in free will leads them to kind of like not be able to accept what the scientists are telling us about climate change, so that they go into denial about that it's happening. This is just one instance where like the belief in free will isn't just harming us on a personal level day to day, it's harming us as a whole global civilization. So again, like these kinds of I've just one of the things that this whole free will issue has taught me is that our leaders, our scientists, are not nearly as intelligent as we often give them credit for. And so, but with things, we have to just simply wait until people within them, leaders within the certain fields, kind of like begin to understand things that we've already understood. I mean, again, we're leading this, but we really need the authorities within academia to understand what we're saying, understand the this profound harm, this existential harm, actually, with the climate change connection that free will, subjects us to. I mean, it's an extremely important topic.
And
Yeah.
understanding the free will illusion is important for our mental health and criminal justice systems as well, because we could be more proactive in preventing crime from happening in the first place. I mean, instead of like being for retribution and bringing back torture and the death penalty and all that stuff that often comes up in the Bible, how about we bring about a mental health system that aims to stop people from offending in the first place? Yeah.
Hey guys, I need to end this episode because I have to go soon. But this has been a great talk, and in the future, I think we'll want to talk a little bit more about the climate change and how we deal with truths that are inconvenient for because they make us sad when we recognize the truth, but and how we deal with that because that's overcoming emotional biases is one of the hardest things to do.
That
Yeah.
sounds great. Absolutely.
As I
Okay.
mentioned with the mental health system thing, that I mean that needs to be reformed because
Yeah.
I do think it's important, George, that um, neuroscientists discover the causes of crime and aim to tackle this on a mental health level.
Jamie, I agree with you completely. I think we have to focus on this a lot more because, like, you're right. I mean, like, this free will belief is causing people to commit crimes that they wouldn't commit, were it not for this belief. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I got to end this episode, but it was great talking to you guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow too. So,
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
yeah, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs, George Ortega, and Jamie Soden. And we had a lot of fun talking about causality and the first cause argument and about the eternal universe or the Big Bang or multiverse and all that fun stuff, and how the free will topic, once we think about it, leads us to so many other questions that we can have fun discussing, but not just fun, we make a difference and eventually make a happier world. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.